Hey everyone, I'm Zach. Welcome to First Timers. Today I'm replacing washing machine valves for my first time. That same. In this video, I'm going to walk through why I'm replacing the valves, how I chose the new valves, the process I used to replace them, the tools I needed, and how much time it took and the cost. If as you're watching this, you find this video helpful, please subscribe. One of our goals with this channel, clearly we're a new channel, is to help other first timers both save time and money and frustration as they're going through similar projects. So the first piece, why am I replacing the valves? Well, I'm replacing my valves because one of them is leaking. I know this because it's wet. And if you're like me, your solution has probably been something like swapping the towels out to keep it dry. And you can only do that for so long before you might have other issues like water damage or mold growth. Maybe yours are leaking as well, or you're replacing them proactively with new ones that have water hammer arresters or something like that. But either way, the first step is picking the valve. I thought this would be the easiest part. Apparently there's a lot more to know about valves than I thought, so let's get into that and I'll walk you through what I think are some of the need to knows as you go to pick your new valve. Okay, so picking a valve. The first thing I learned is that valve type matters. The three most common that I saw were the ball valve, gate valve, and globe valve. The ball valve has best flow, best seal. Gate valve is shortly thereafter, and then globe valve is kind of the worst of the three. It's still good, but most of the valves you're going to see are going to be globe valves, averaging between $5 and $15. The reason you see a lot more globe valves is because of geometry. So ball valves and gate valves are a straight through flow design, and so by nature they have to be straight, and that limits their size and configuration. So a globe valve, you can have the angle, which is what I have in my laundry box. So if you have the room to put in a straight through flow valve like a gate or a ball, they're worth considering. They're not that much more expensive, if at all. But if you need an angled outlet, you're probably gonna have to use a globe valve like I do. Another quick side note is if you're shopping around for valves, you're also gonna see a lot of the single lever valves. The main advantage of these is that it puts two valves into one body so you can turn them on and off easy. I'm not really going to get into those because they don't really work for my application today. The installation methods are a little different. They're more space constrained. So after you know the type of valve that you're going to buy, one of the other things you're going to need to know is the size of the pipes. This was a little bit weird because it's not one-to-one. So if you need a 1/2 inch valve, the pipe isn't going to measure a 1/2 inch across. This goes way back into how they came up with naming conventions and numbering conventions back in the day. But there's a couple ways to find the size that you need. One, and hopefully this is the one for you, it should be stamped on the valve itself. Makes it really easy. You'll see a 1/2 or 3/4 on the valve and you just buy the same size. If not, you can find it using a string. So this is finding the nominal pipe size. Take the string, wrap it around the pipe, and then take that string and measure it on a ruler, and that'll come out with either an inch or a metric measurement, depending on which one you use. And then there's a table that'll be linked below that you can pull up and it'll tell you what size to buy. So in addition to valve type and pipe size, you're going to need to know the connection type that you need. Generally, the three that I saw were either threaded, a push to connect like a shark bite or PEX, or sweated, which is soldered. A lot of the valves I saw also offered multiple, so you could have like a threaded and a sweat option, so the same valve you could either solder on or screw on. My valves are threaded, and so I had to go through that exercise, and now is probably a good time to cover some nomenclature because it was a little confusing. Okay, so if you're buying threaded valves, here's the need to know. Thread type. If it says MIP, MPT, MNPT, MPT, or NPS, they all have the same thread type and they will all fit together. The second thing that you need to know is the M stands for male, and that will fit into any FIP, female side. The biggest difference between all of those, and the biggest thing to know, is that some of them will have a tapered thread and some of them will have a straight thread. And if it has a tapered thread, this will be a valve that says something like NPT. NPS will be straight. The tapered threads provide a better seal, and generally it seems to be that you don't need to use Teflon tape, even though you can if you still want to. But if you have a straight thread, you need to use Teflon tape or you won't be able to get a fully watertight seal. Usually the description of the valve on the website or wherever you're buying it from will either say tapered or threaded. And again, if it says NPT or NPS, that's NPT is tapered and NPS is straight. Another thing to consider when you're buying your new valve is the seal material type. It seems to be that Teflon, PTFE, is one of the better ones out there that you can get, but I didn't see this on a lot of the residential valves for the washing machines. Usually it was a synthetic type of rubber, which includes neoprene, EPDM, and a few others, and they seem to work fine. You will want to check the temperature rating for the material on whatever valve you're choosing. Residential hot water is considered to be about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of the seal types I saw were good for well above that, but if you have extremely hot water for whatever reason, that might be a consideration. And I measured our hot water temperature with a meat thermometer and we're at 115 degrees, so we should be fine. One other thing to consider when you're purchasing a valve is the pressure rating. Most residential pressure that I've seen is, at least according to the internet, was between 45 and 80 psi. Most of the valves I saw were good to well above 100 psi. The valve I've chosen is good to 125 psi up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it drops off a little bit. But again, I measured our water temperature, we're at 115, so we should be fine in terms of normal operating pressure. But what that doesn't account for is water hammer. So if you have water hammer concerns, that's an additional consideration, and you may need to think about water hammer arresters. So let's talk about water hammer and water hammer arresters real quick. So what is water hammer? Water hammer is basically just pressure spikes in your plumbing system. It's called water hammer because it's when it happens, it sounds like someone's banging inside of the wall with a hammer. Basically what causes that is a sudden stop of the water flow in the pipes. If you think of this as a freeway with a bunch of cars on it, everybody bumper to bumper driving 60 miles an hour, and somebody suddenly slams on their brakes and everybody piles up, that's the same concept as water hammer. There's a lot of water in the pipe that's moving at one time, and when you suddenly stop it, there's nowhere for the energy to go, and so the pipe shakes. Water hammer is an issue because the pressure spikes and the pipe shaking can damage the plumbing and, basically end up with water leaks and water damage. Water hammer arresters are pressure relief devices. The general consensus seems to be that you should just default and buy them. They do add quite a bit of cost, ranging up to the $30 to $40 as opposed to the $5 to $15 for the valves, but it is a good risk mitigation. So water hammer arresters will come in generally two forms. You can get them directly on the valve, or you can get devices that you can add to the back of the machine if you don't have room to fit a larger valve with a water hammer arrestor on it in your water box. So I want to talk about the valves I've chosen. Obviously I haven't got water hammer arresters with these ones, and the reason for that is there's a couple. One is eventually we're going to redo this room, at which point we may change the valve box in the wall so that there's a little bit more room to fit water hammer arresters. Currently there's not on ours. And in the meantime, we may even revisit the decision and buy some to put on the back of the machine. I do want to call out that buying valves without the water hammer arresters is not the best risk mitigation strategy. So for now, just know that that's something that you should give some thought to if you're purchasing valves for your own project. Another note when you're looking at new valves is that the code in your area may actually require water hammer arresters, so you should also look that up. Okay, now that we've covered the need to knows on picking a new valve, let's actually replace them. So the first thing to do to get started is going to be to turn the water off to the house. You're going to do this at the water main. That way there's no water flowing to the rest of the house while you're doing this, so you don't risk a leak. My water main's outside, so I'm going to go do that now. Now that I've turned the water off to the house, I'm going to go open some faucets to drain the water that's still in the pipes, so that way when I take the old valves off and the pipe is open, the water doesn't come squirting out. Okay, so letting the water drain took a while, but now that that's over, I'm going to take the hoses off next, and then move the machine out of the way just so that there's a little bit more room. washing machine out of the way. I'm going to take the old valves off now. A couple things to note with this. Mine are threaded, so I'm going to use 2 crescent wrenches to take them off. If you have sweated on valves, you may need a torch and some other tools to get those off, or if you have a push to connect, there are some special tools to help get shark bite connections off as well. Another thing to note is my valves have adapters on them, which bring them up out of the bottom of the box on the wall, and so I don't need to cut any of the drywall away to access them. You may have valves that are sitting flush with the bottom of the valve box, and to get to the connection in order to remove them, you may need to remove a little bit of the drywall under the valve box. Okay, so to take them off, I've got a 10-inch crescent wrench and a 8-inch crescent wrench. I'm just gonna get that sized to the adapter so that it holds the pipe. Make sure that I'm on the flat spots, and then righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Keeps moving. You make sure the wrenches are on there nice and tight, because brass is soft. Almost. Neat. And just like that, it's off. Dunzo. And only a little bit of sweat. Okay. So here I've got some white vinegar and a towel, and I'm just going to use that to try to scrub it off. Okay. Okay, so now that we got the old valves off and all the gunk kind of mostly cleaned up, it's time to put the new valves on. So I'm going to use the same 2 wrenches to put the new ones on, because I bought the exact same kind that I took off. So I can use the same tools. And these actually have tapered threads, but even though they have tapered threads, I'm still going to use some PTFE or Teflon sealant tape. So I have some 1/2-inch sealant tape here as well. So let's go. What I'm going to try to do with this tape is I'm going to start at this end of the valve, and I'm going to wrap it this way, following the spiral of the threads. And my goal here is to wrap it around 3 or 4 times, but not have any of it hanging off the edge here, because I don't want it to rip off or get sucked up into the valve or any of that. So I just put it on there. I'm going to try to keep it spread out as best I can, and then we will follow the threads. Hopefully that works. So now I'm just gonna try to get the threads started straight. There we go, because I don't want to cross thread this. Round 2. These threaded ones, it's sometimes difficult to get them lined up. So if you twist it backwards, get it kind of straight up, you can feel it when it drops in like that. And then if you can turn it with your hand, you know you're not cross threading it. More or less straight. Okay, cool. So both valves are in now. Before I put the machine back in place, I'm gonna go turn the water to the house back on just to make sure that there's no leaks here. I close the valve so that I don't turn the house water back on and have it come squirting out everywhere. But I wanna make sure that the threads seated well enough before we put the machine back in, just in case we have to take them back out and do anything else. Turn the water back on and no leaks. So next step, gonna put the washing machine back here. So I decided I wanted Teflon tape on the hose connections also, and couldn't get it on there with the machine in spot, so pulled the machine back out to put some tape on there, and now we'll connect the machine. So plug it in. Dry. All right. Now that that's all over, let's run through it real quick. The first thing I had to do was choose a valve. So in terms of flow and seal, globe valves are good, gate valves are better, and ball valves are best. Once I chose the valve type I was going to use, I needed to make sure I bought the right size, so I checked the pipe size using a string and a ruler. And remember, if you're getting threaded connections like I had to, the tapered threads provide a better seal than straight threads. And once you have all that figured out, make sure to give your valve a quick check on temperature and pressure ratings. And one other thing to consider when you're buying your valve is to think through whether you want to include water hammer arresters or not. Once you've made the decision on what valves you want to buy and use, installing them is as simple as making sure you turn off the water at the main in order to prevent any spraying when you take the old valves off. Draining that water by turning on the faucets around your home. Then removing the old valves. If yours have adapters like mine and they're threaded, you may be able to do that without removing any drywall. But if you have other connection types, or those connections are below the bottom of the box, you may need to remove some drywall. And then once you've removed the valves, cleaning up the area, like if you had mineralization like I did, you don't want that to cause an issue in the threads. And then once you've cleaned up the area, installing the new valves and using some PTFE thread sealant tape if you choose to do so. And then making sure those valves are turned off and turning your water back on and checking for leaks. And then the last step is hooking up the washing machine. So all in all, it took about an hour of actual working time. Most of the time in this video was spent moving the camera around. Because my valves were already installed with adapters and I didn't have to remove any drywall, I think that helped with the time a lot, and it simplified the tools I needed. So all I needed to remove and install my new valves were 2 crescent wrenches. I used an 8-inch and a 10-inch. To check the valve, the pipe size, there was a ruler and some string, some PTFE thread tape in order to seal it better, and then also the mute thermometer for checking my hot water temp. So all of that together cost me about $67. $67 isn't bad compared to what it would have cost me to hire a plumber to do it. If you're watching this video because you're also getting ready to swap out your own washing machine valves, I'll put links in the description below to all of the tools, as well as some information on the process and some links to some other websites that I use that help provide info on choosing valves and things like that, as well as the table for valve sizing in case you need that. Most of what I bought, I found my valves and things like that on Amazon, but obviously Home Depot and Lowe's will have everything you need as well. If you found this video helpful, we'll be doing a lot more projects around the house, so please subscribe and follow along, and thanks for watching.